I love my brother, very good relationship, but in real time, I don't think I sound like my brother, but when I hear it, I think I do. I don't know what that means. Anyway, for those of you joining us for the first time, now would be a great time. Please introduce yourself and tell us what brings you here.
Great. Hey everyone, my name is Santosh Srinivas. This is my first time joining NeurotechX. So I'm basically from East Coast. I am actually, I work for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton. I don't know if anyone...
Oh yeah, big
Can
consulting.
you speak up a bit? It's kind of hard to hear.
Oh, is it hard to hear? Okay. Sorry about that. Let me see. I'm very close to the monitor, so I don't know what else I can actually do. Okay. I work for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton. I'm actually a scientific programming lead. I'm also working towards my PhD in the field of computational neuroscience, but it's a long way. It's a tough thing to do, job and everything. I'm actually, I should say I'm not new to EEG because I've been working on EEG for some time now, but mainly focused on seizures, epilepsy detection, right? Because one of my client is FDA, and at FDA there's only one EEG approved medical device to treat seizures. It's called RNS Neuropace. So we have actually built predictive models in detecting seizure patterns and everything. So this was almost 4 years ago, and on the East Coast, basically I live in closer to Washington, D.C., away from all the drama that's actually happening, right? But I'm in Virginia. In Virginia and DC, I do operate a meetup called Nova Brain Computing. So it's all focused on EEG. I have my own EEG headsets, Emotive, Muse, and lately I'm actually working on integrating EEG with VR headset. So basically that's where I'm actually working on. It's all related to my work and at the same time passion too. So it's not only EEG. Last thing is I also work on fMRI data. So just to let you know, right? So it's very important for me to work on EEG and fMRI because fMRI, a lot of veterans actually goes through a lot of trauma. So we process a lot of fMRI data. We have written some TBI predictor models in fMRI. So yeah, that's the brief introduction about myself. So I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to join this group. So I just wanted to kind of keep myself occupied.
Sure.
Anything to keep learning is actually a good thing. So yeah, that's it for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, can you say more, and drop a link to your meetup?
Yeah, absolutely. Is it over? You want me to drop it off in the chat window here?
Yeah. One of the topics I was going to cover today was trying to get us to switch to HackMD, or some better system than dropping everything in this chat that then people can't access later. But
no worries.
That sounds super interesting. Certainly, there's a couple of us here who also have an fMRI background or use fMRI. Terrific. Yeah. I mean,
question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Morgan. Question. So you said, Santosh, you said you were doing computational neuroscience.
I'm working towards computational computational neuroscience. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you working on there?
So it's still in the early stages. Basically, I'll be focusing on more on the human performance related activities. So it's still yet to decide on my final thesis. So it's early stages of my work towards that goal. It's
Okay.
actually working closely with my professor. He is actually out of the country right now because of the COVID. He could not come in. So
Oh, no.
yeah, it's doing it remotely has been a bit of a challenge, and also working and doing it. But yeah, mainly more on human performance. So that's what I'm actually focusing on.
It's cool that you're also doing EG and VR stuff. There are quite a large number of us who are working on trying to get ready to integrate VR and AR with different BCI, whether it's FNIRS, EIT, or EG. Yeah. I'd love to at some point hear about your experiences with trying to integrate those devices together. As everyone had different experience
Yeah.
with trying to combine EG and VR lately, and seems like something a lot of people want to do, but there isn't really any good knowledge base about how to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, not to take too much time on this, right? Because I've been working on EEG plus VR for a little more than a year. I actually have a Neurable headset as well. So I don't know if you know about Neurable at all.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, great. It's a
Yeah.
Boston-based company. We work closely with Adam. I'm in touch with him pretty much on a weekly basis.
Okay, that's awesome. All
Yeah,
right.
so it's a great tool, and I don't limit myself to Neurable. We have written some libraries using Emotive with VR headset as well. So the more the channels, the better. Again, it's still I'm still learning more and more things, right? As and when we go. But yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. But it'll be great to uh, keep in this. Basically network within this community to kind of explore more. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please. I mean, and I want to just say that I think it's pretty new that Nurble has a Discord channel.
Oh,
Or
they made one finally?
they did, and
Oh,
I see a lot of. I mean, they got a lot of interest, or a lot of people
do
joining.
you have a link to it we can share?
Sure.
Are you referring to the new form factor that you're?
No. Just. Sorry. Let me just find my.
They made a Discord server for
Oh, okay.
communication with alpha and beta testers and probably other people interested, which, like, in terms of trying to do like interaction with developers,
Okay.
especially in a system that is partially designed to interact with gamers, a Discord channel makes a lot of sense
Gotcha.
at a location. Like, I've worked on a lot of
Okay.
hardware through
1 second.
Discord channels. Um,
That's good to know.
by any chance, are you with the Neurable headset you have? Have you been working in Unity or in one of the other environments that they are supporting?
Currently, we are limited to working within their SDK scope, whatever their API kind of supports. We don't actually have the latest SDK from them, right? So yes, to answer your question, yeah, it's a Unity, and with the HTC Vive. So That's the current scope of it right now. So we have actually written a game, and we were able to have and capture all the ERPs, and also measure some additional events, right? So yeah, it's limited in scope with Mutable, with whatever SDK they can actually offer. But that actually set the kind of standards on how we can actually do it with emotive as well. So emotive with HTC. I'm still yet to put together the eye tracking, right? That's still a work in progress, but I'll be more than happy to share anything I can, in that
Yeah,
realm.
I hope we can get a Neurable for the SF group of neurotech people for hands-on stuff. But like right now, I'm at one of the places where we've done a lot of the in-person stuff for our new building. But we do a lot of VR development here, and we've done a bit of EG and VR, but with like open source hardware and like 3-channel to 5-channel stuff that we aren't all that accurate with, and we really want to try to test out Nurble because also being in SF, we have direct connections with Unity, so we know how to make sure stuff integrates well. Because, as you mentioned, it's hard to integrate newer hardware tech into things like Unity. Like Unity is a great platform, but it's so big that it's hard to properly get stuff in where you need it.
Right. And you're supporting which group or company, if I may ask?
What?
You're with which company, or
Or I'm not with any company. I'm just a part of NeurotechX.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I'm just in the San Francisco area, part of the San Francisco chapter, but I mainly do open source related work, and like I also love trying out and testing different integrations of EG,
Yes.
VR, gaming, all that stuff.
Great. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to find the link to the Discord, and why is it not? If I'm not admin, can I not invite people?
You should be able to invite people unless they disabled it. Like literally, it should be a drop down at the very top in Discord. It should be there should be a invite people.
Yeah. Okay. There it goes. And
yeah.
Thank you for explaining that to me.
Yeah. Also, it might be since Discord ad links don't always work the same, this might have a limited number of uses or limited time use.
Yeah. I mean, it expires in a day. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, and I'm very well. I mean, it sounds like you're using Emotive's SDK, but I just want to say that I'm still very interested for us to be able to access Emotive systems directly. Let's call it without license, or to access the raw data from the device, and yeah. So anybody who has that successfully working, love to hear from you. Talked a little bit about that today with a company out of Zagreb, which it's going to be interesting to hear him come talk at NeurotechX Paris, which is, what was it? I think it's Precision BCI. Anyway, but the actual technology is focused on a new electrode type. So using extruded hydrogels, which I had to learn about. But yeah, always so interested about the other kind of libraries that you are using though, and also what you are covering at Nova Brain Computing. So yeah, and yeah, I know Northern Virginia well.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I wanted to just at the beginning of the week. Was the Royal Society actually does a book event and covering a bunch of science books, and wanted to just say that one of those I've got to say is a real standout. I mean, I'm totally biased in the, like, I'm assuming everybody's just as interested in psychiatry as I am, but it's called The Great Pretender. And it's written by the woman who wrote Brain on Fire. So she had autoimmune encephalopathy, if I'm getting that correct. Anyway, she had a what we would call a neurological condition that gave her made her experience true psychosis. And that was what Brain on Fire was all about. But The Great Pretender, it's super interesting from a whole bunch. I mean, I thought it was going to be a book about this very famous study where grad students check themselves into mental hospitals, reporting a stereotypical set of symptoms, and then seeing what happened. And this was back in 1973.
Be careful when searching for that book, because literally a couple weeks or about a month ago, a anime on Netflix called The Great Pretender just came out.
Okay.
So if you search, make sure you search like for the book and not the anime, manga, or all that. Like, it's gotten good reviews. Good. But yeah. It's about something entirely different.
Okay.
It is in some aspects a bit of psychology. This person is pretty much a professional con artist, and it's like talking about that stuff. But no, it's completely different. So make sure you read the book.
So it's interesting because the way it started was what I expected, in terms of like describing this study and setting it in some historical context, and also giving you a bit more about, certainly some of her experience of like, my care, she wrote this book because her care completely changed from the time where she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital to where, by like a hair's thread of luck, would have it that a doctor persisted with a particular train of thought and said like, hey, you know what, you might be one of these very rare people who have this autoimmune condition, and because it's so early, you could be treatable. And that when she had the change in diagnosis, like, what she noticed was that like her care completely changed. And anyway, so that's how it started. And but it's gotten much more complex as it goes on, and as she digs into more of the history behind the people involved in that study. And it's ending up to be actually a little bit like A Great Pretender, in the sense of not everything was like not everything about that reported study is turning out to be factual. And it's a little bit like, it's a little like the Zimbardo study, where it's, like many decades later, we're finding out that like the Zimbardo prisons, the Stanford prison experiment was not exactly run the way it was described in the original papers. and at this point, I haven't quite finished it, but at this point, it's so she's discovered a whole bunch of inaccuracies and just other strange developments in what she understands happened in the study as opposed to how it was reported, and now it's caught up in the some of the people who were writing the DSM back in the 70s too, and which again is like its own very interesting history. And for those who I typically talk about this book, Mind Fixers, which is a really great history of psychiatry, and it's interesting. Again, like she even talks about Heath, the Tulane psychiatrist, or the Tulane researcher who's basically described in the Pleasure Shock book that I talked about a couple of weeks ago as well. So all these threads come together. All these people come together in this story that she's telling, and it's an absolute. I mean, it's so much worse than you thought with the characters and the stories that are happening, and yet at the same time, it's also. Well, I mean, I don't want to kind of like ruin it, but I've never. I mean, I've laughed out loud many times in reading this book. From just like things happening where you just can't believe that's what happened, and highly recommend it. The Brian Cox did this overview with the authors, and there were a bunch of great books, and I think one other was kind of relevant, but anyway.
Are you saying Brian Cox did the intro for this book, or?
No, he did this Royal Society event. So
gotcha.
Brian Cox is, in addition to being an astrophysicist at University of Manchester, he's he's like professor of public engagement at the Royal Society or something.
Okay,
like I forget his exact title, but it was cool because he's doing a Zoom event like everybody, right? And he's also got the 1970s. It's the interior of the 1970s TARDIS behind him, which that was my doctor. Tom Baker was my doctor.
Which one?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Which one? Who's your best one?
Tom Baker.
Oh, Tom Baker. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've had, kids have different doctors, and I love the fact that Sasha's, like she doesn't understand that Doctor Who has sometimes been a man, which I think is great. It's like, the older kids will put on Doctor Who and she'll be like, no, where's my doctor? Yeah. And yeah, the way it should be. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that book because it really was can't recommend it enough. As well as some of the history behind, the fight for biological psychiatry. So any switching for a bit, news or updates regarding EEG notebooks? I know I've got some Moab activity on Slack.
We have one or two new features come in this week, like beginnings of a CLI, command line interface, which should make usage a lot easier.
So is this more than just run notebooks?
Right, it's kind of an extension of that. But
cool.
Basically, now you can just run it from anywhere with the command line, like MuseLSL.
Yes.
without having to be in the directory or running a specific script. So it kind of feels a bit more like a real command line program now. But that was just like me doing some random fucking around on Sunday night. So it's kind of early days, but it works.
That's awesome. Let me just.
John, what was the long-term like Muse-S data collection project you were looking at?
Yeah, I mean, ongoing. Like, how's it going?
And what kind of data are you looking for? So is it like 24/7 or is it just like a lot?
That project is sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and the the kind of long-term component is, or the things I was discussing before were just making an 8-hour recording, right, overnight, and getting the data and having that kind of robust. And I'm still kind of figuring that out, like sticking the thing on regularly. And I've taken a look at the data a little bit more than I had done before, because I was just focusing previously on just trying to get recordings and so on. And surprise, surprise, it's super noisy.
I move around a lot in my sleep too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a sleep thing. I separately to that, I actually I did sometime over the last week actually run the EEG Notebooks M170 experiment with the Muse-S, and got a reasonably good M170 from a couple of hundred trials in the temporal channels. So just like the other Muse models, like the frontal ones, not much there, but the temporal ones, yeah. So like the device is great and it works as far as I can tell, but the sleep data is messy as hell. So
I was looking at it, and so I cut my own hair in like expectation that it would help, and I found this week that it actually did help a little bit. I'm still practicing, so this one ended up being a wedge and not a line, but it did help. It did help. Like my right one,
man, that is commitment.
Is better than my left one. So
I still haven't figured it out. Like what makes it? I think like getting the thing to touch your ear seems to help. But
it's interesting because like even when they were touching my ear, they were not like settling down. So it's the fabric electrodes are a little bit touchy.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we've been trying to kind of like, I've been just making my own, reflections and notes on these things, but something that I've been saying a few times, and I'll have to actually kind of act on it sometime soon, is that we should have like a shared, probably in the first instance, just like a shared document, but like all people who were doing this, trying to figure out some of these, particularly like the sleep recording things, which have their own particular challenges, just pooling some expertise and experience on what the, shaving your hair, if you want to like take some photos.
There's like two sides, because I want like 24/7 recording. So there's the sleep side. And so what I did was I got one of them. And with the Muse Monitor app on eBay, I picked up just another pod. So there's like a pod without the strap. And so you can switch it out when it's time to charge. And it just like reconnects, even though it's a different Muse, which is convenient. And then, I also am trying to see if I can like make a bandana work, like fashion wise, to cover it up. And then just like, see, I could be normal. I could be normal.
Right.
This could be me all the time. So goals.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we want to know.
Yeah, we should all start wearing bandanas as a fashion statement to make it normal, and then
right,
everyone will work.
I'm not beyond that. But have you actually looked at any sleep recording data yet?
It gives me a little horseshoe on the Mind Monitor, and as far as like just looking at sometimes the signal is like all over the place, and sometimes like you can tell like, okay, it's settled down, like the noise isn't there anymore. That's as far as it's gone. It also gives me IMU data, but I haven't like parsed through and been like, okay, here I'm moving, let me cut those out. It's whenever I stand up and move around, even if it's like a small amount, my temporal lobes, like they immediately freak out. But even if I'm standing up and like not in a non-natural position, if I'm at least still for a little bit, they settle back down. And so it's very much like probably picking out pieces here and there when you're not moving is like the next play to say, okay, we have like a good 5 seconds here, a good 10 seconds here, and I'm at my desk most of the day, so like just seeing how big of windows I can like reasonably get might be a play.
I mean, so that's exactly I think how it's going to work with it's like finding clean periods and then basically kind of interpolating, or at least noting at what point in time you have a decent piece of data that you can analyze and say this is what we're saying like the brain state is at this point in time, and like figuring out the best way of automating that.
Mm-hmm. And I have a Fitbit, and I gave it and got the Aura Ring, and they're giving me similar like REM cycles and similar surprisingly similar data when it comes to my sleep stages. So looking to
that's encouraging.
Yeah.
I wondered if it was just total like made up the info that
when you say Fitbit, which particular Fitbit device are you trying to?
I have the Charge 4 for the Fitbit, and I just have like one of the Aura Rings. And I also thought that it was like kind of just witchcraft, but the fact that like the graphs at least looked like pretty similar, where I was like, oh yeah, both of them said I was in REM sleep at this time. Both of them said this. EEG should be like much better, but yeah, hopefully that.
Well, it's going to be a lot noisier. I mean, I think it's kind of going to be the opposite. So like I've got the Aura Ring as well, and I started. Were you on the call last week?
No, I'm gonna have to jump off the call this week too, because school is like killing me. But
yeah, I did a run through of I logged into Open Humans, and I have pulling my Aura data from Open Humans. I kind of figured that out. So if you're interested, like go find the video, and then there's about a 10-minute section where I'm like going through some notebooks and some code and stuff.
Oh heck
be useful if you want to do that. But I was thinking, my current thinking on this is that I do want to cross-reference it, the EEG with the Aura for the sleep stuff, but I'm not necessarily assuming that the EEG will be cleaner than the Aura, because it's just going to be noisy, because it's it's not as it's a noisy signal, and I don't so
for sleep
some like combination, and also probably using the Aura for like labeling segments is probably going to be the strategy that might work.
I got the EEG would be like the fourth signal. So there's like the Aura Ring, there's the Fitbit that gives it, and then I got this. It's like an under mattress like pad.
Oh,
that is like actually pretty good. It can like pick up my heart rate through the mattress, which was like crazy. And I haven't crossed the mattress pad data with the other two yet, but it's a good sensor. It probably gives you similar stuff. So hopefully between like you can find the true mean between the sensors.
That's brilliant.
But that one
the other part of the picture is basically expert or semi-automated EEG polysomnography, right? Which is what you actually want to do with the EEG data. But what I want to do is I don't want to have to like manually do the polysomnography, but I do want to get the EEG data from the different sleep stages and look at the analyze that for kind of different reasons. But I need the segmentation coming from somewhere. So some combination of like a complementary activity tracking or blood flow tracking device or anything, and some semi-automated polysomnography probably is going to be how it goes. But that's kind of down the line.
Automated
clean data.
Yeah, semi supervised learning, where it's just like, oh hey, automating our training sets. The dream. Oh, you're muted, Santosh.
No,
Wait.
you're muted.
Muted. Okay, yeah.
There you go.
Oh, hear me? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Were you able to purchase the CEEG, behind the ear EEG at all? Where is it available for sale? Actually?
Yeah, so it's a Dutch company, TMSI.
I'm sorry?
It's called TMSI.
Oh, TMSI. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll get you a link. So yeah, I dropped in a link to a device. It's just funny that you were talking about shaving this hair, like here, and the C-Grid is kind of focused on targeting what they call non-hair skin, right? and anyway, this is a particular variant of the C-Grid that a project that I found, the Needless, which is a hysterical name, but is kind of it's again kind of a cool device, especially when you think about using they're using the Smarting M Brain Train amplifier, I think, in this case, and that was also interesting just because again I keep hearing about this particular amplifier and it being very good and very inexpensive, and so it just,
and they put that in the collar, right?
Yeah, so it's sitting there, and yeah, I don't want to jump ahead to the kernel stuff yet, but there's a big reason to not put all the weight in the headset, and anyway, so Needless. But I'll get you the TMSI link.
Yeah, actually, I did search for that.
It's like 10 or 15 euros per.
Oh, okay.
Per C-Grid, or no, sorry, in is that packs of 10?
I've been wondering what the amplifier you use for that is. So this is M Brain Train one, and how much is that? Do you know then?
Well, I hesitate to say what I've heard without I want to see a quote.
Ballpark. Sub 1,000,
like sub 1,500, or sub 2,000, let's say.
And it's something relatively compact that
I don't know
that collar thing they have.
Again, let me just get a quote from them, and I've already talked to the CEO about trying to get him to come talk at NeurotechX Paris, being more time zone friendly for him. But yeah, I'm really curious because the guy from Zagreb was also talking about this system, and it sounds, it really does. It's not like free EG32 cheap, but the fact that it's quality components with safety testing, with CE mark and all of these things, it definitely is an appropriate time to just talk about the hardware hub, which again is the place to use your membership to get discounts and support the community with the hardware hub. And this is one of the devices that if it's really that inexpensive, I'd love to see as an option in the hardware hub, even if we can't get it with necessarily a member discount. But here's the
Morgan, while you're actually doing that, has this community explored building EEG device with Raspberry Pi at all? Any thoughts on that?
Well, so yeah, so the
Pico.
guys who make, and I don't know, is Josh on? Well, Dimitri's on.
Okay.
So Dimitri, who's in the group currently, this is his board design, and I'm sorry I haven't taken it out of the plastic to, but this is the free EG32 board.
Oh, okay.
Which,
Are those available now?
they're well.
Forever ago.
So the crowd supply hasn't officially started.
Okay.
So, but if you talk to Josh or myself, and we can get you set up. Right now, you can't. I think there's actually a component. I think the AD7771 is currently out of stock for a couple more months. Anyway, this is their 32 channel system. And less than, I mean, it's like about 180 per board when we're buying them in like 5s or 10s. So
Can
still,
you add a link for that, Morgan? Can you add a link for that?
yeah, I will. And Jaden, we've got some that are available for developers.
Awesome. That would okay. I'll reach out to you.
Like Andre is gonna get one, and let me just put in some.
That'd be great since I'm losing my sight in Daisy.
Okay, because that was the universities.
Yeah, and so is the Muse.
Okay.
So now I'm just a Notion person.
Well, that works. I mean, that's quality.
But it's nice to have them on.
And also, I've been exploring with Blino board. I don't know if anybody knows Blino. Yeah.
So I'm curious about that. I wanted to just mention both OpenEEG as well as Hack EEG.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hack EEG is an interesting project. Things that we were talking about at the Hardware Hub meeting was, of course, should we be? It's one thing to sell a maker's project like Gene's Spectra kit, an EIT. It's an EIT testing learning platform, right? The main thing being that you're not going to attach the Spectra to a person's head, right? And Luc Janvaux, who makes the ultrasound kit, would say the same thing. Like, this is not for transcranial focused ultrasound, right? This is for testing. Can you find studs in your wall kind of thing? And even though he's really interested in talking about fuss papers and the new developments that are taking place in kind of like the ultrasound area. So like 2 weeks ago, I don't know if anybody caught this, but Butterfly presented their big rollout. I forget what the letters. It's like Butterfly FQ or anyway. I'll find it, but it's a handheld ultrasound device. So major improvements in sort of the form factor and allow a device that is easily used in an ambulance or in the field, so to speak, right? So it can be used together with an iPhone or a tablet, smartphone or tablet. And let me just get a link for that, because that's actually a very nice segue into the kernel discussion.
And I'm gonna post my Twitter in case I would like to connect with you all. Just
Please, and when you sign up on when you get on Slack,
yeah,
do the same in introductions. Yeah,
absolutely, will do.
Butterfly IQ, of course.
Butterfly IQ. Okay.
But here's the I don't know what FQ means. Anyway, here's link, and it does give me hope that that kind of like an open water handheld, or easy to use in the ambulance kind of device is also going to be possible, even though I still don't quite fully understand the open water physics, or what they're actually going for in terms of a product. But just wanted to mention this. And of course, last week, the NeurotechX India event had David Eagleman. And just wanted to say that I think there's still a sale on the Neosensory Buzz. Just want to say that because it's a cool, they're a cool group of so he had, as usual. I mean, I've seen him give a bunch of talks recently, just because he's also been doing a book tour for Livewired, his book Livewired. But they have a Slack channel too, and they are doing a new developer contest. That as soon as I got more details, I'll definitely post. But I, check out their older developer contests, because I think they had one in April, and it was cool. And I think I posted before their, what they've posted in terms of their contributions to Bluetooth libraries and things like that they're using to build their Buzz. And of course, what's seen in Westworld and is in Eagleman's lab, although still not a product yet, but the full vests of sensors. So vibrational sensors, vibrotactile sensors, or devices. I think there's like 400. There's only like 4 on the Buzz itself. But all good stuff. Anybody catch those talks this weekend? It was good. The Neuro 2.0. Oh, it was very early in the morning. I mean, they're all on YouTube now. You can check the Slack channel for links to the YouTube. To catch them live was early on the West Coast. I mean, not offensive.
Yeah, I did my usual of registering for them and setting an alarm, and then when the alarm goes off, realizing that I'd rather sleep.
Yeah. It'll be on YouTube later.
Yeah, basically.
No, it was a really nice event though. Still, that they pulled together, with a good size audience.
Is that the one that had someone talking about neuro architecture?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you see that?
I was half awake.
Well, okay, so what is neuro architecture at least?
Certainly, yeah. I'm not ready to define it. But I think it was getting at what is it Faraz at the Neurotech Barcelona So forgive me for us if I'm getting your name wrong, but that how you respond to space, how you respond to space and color and yeah, like how you respond to your environment in a somewhat in the the Moby Lab sense, where it's just like if you're free to move around to space, and it much easier done in VR, honestly, or like certainly the experiments. Moby Lab tries to basically create a Hollywood set that changes without you being without you having kind of like the VR goggles. So the entire this huge space in the basement of the San Diego Supercomputing Center is this 4-wall green screen space that they can shape the environment. But we'll catch it on YouTube later. So yeah, today. So unfortunately, I don't know if anybody was expecting Tim from Backyard Brains today, but slight mix-up in terms of scheduling, and he will be joining us in just a couple weeks. But it was also Kernel's big debut of their Kernel Flow this afternoon at noon, and it was interesting. So did anybody catch the stream already? Yeah. Okay. No, but just John. So super. I mean, like there's definitely some real technological advancements going on. And let me just. So I was hoping we might get an optical imaging person was potentially going to join us. Let me.
The the kind of style of the presentation was fun and a little bit funny, really, because they had this like really opened up this really slick video of their offices, basically.
Yeah.
And but the thing kind of felt a bit like kind of high school video production or something.
I mean,
obviously wasn't super rehearsed, for example.
I mean,
it made the Neuralink demo look really slick.
Is this an extension of what was the cheese wedge technology from Kernel? It was like I don't know. It was like I remember hearing it was like a massive cheese wedge that weighed 20 pounds. That's Kernel.
No,
right?
no. I think I know what you mean. It's the image that the image you showed me, John, where it's like they got that gray box that has, it looks a little like an Apple workstation case, except instead of like being holes, it's actually their K that done the kernel way. Anyway, no,
what's the? I remember us talking before. Sorry, I just came in. Hi.
Sure, no, hi, Richard.
But I remember there was somebody was working on a device, but it was just too heavy to mount on the head. Well, was that FNIRS or was no?
It's definitely FNIRS, and as part of the presentation, they showed you the original system that they bought, right? Which was like the commercial system that is available for this. In terms of the laser generator, and I think it was like I've got some notes, but I didn't take notes on the historical examples. But wasn't that big box that they showed like only like a 4 or 8 channel system that they started with?
Yeah, I felt like what they were showing, it wasn't super clear. Either the scaling they'd achieved was like absolutely phenomenal, or it was showing something that was kind of a unit that contained four things and some other things, and then was showing something that was like the chip inside the unit, and then he was showing something that was their smaller version of that chip. But in any case, he showed kind of like four things in a row, and the first one was about that big, and that was a block of four emitters, I think.
Yeah.
And then they showed some chips, or then there's like a circuit board, and then there were some chips, and the last thing he showed was like that big, and I wasn't clear. Like, is he saying that this thing that's that big is like their redesign of the thing that was that big, which they kind of seem to be implying.
Did you see a picture of the headset that I'm looking at on the website?
Yeah, so
because that looks like it fits.
yeah. So what you ended up with, and this was I thought probably the most awkward video, was the intro where he's wearing this helmet that I did appreciate, knowing Neurosity's design. I did appreciate the fact that they had rigid components together with non-rigid,
I thought the same. Like it's kind of like a tortoise shell.
Thing. It's somewhat adaptive tortoise shell that will pretty much cover the top of your head, right? And if you just imagine it with somewhat of an angle, I mean they were just trying to get it goes back behind the ears. Anyway, but it's got Brian Johnson, doing normal activities, but I don't know if you noticed this, but he couldn't move his head very quickly. Like he was trying to be normal, but he was very much like keeping his head you couldn't do this,
because that break his neck.
And
could that be a side effect of just like being conscious of wearing a device? Because whenever I wear my Notion, I'm always like keeping my head still, regardless of the fact that I know this thing keeps like a death grip on my head, and I could like shake my head around and it won't move.
But I mean, maybe, but I don't. I mean, again, like their sensors are very different, and at the beginning you see them working on the prototypes, okay, and when you see that, you will recognize pretty much any like whole head FNIRS lab. Right, like the walls are just covered in various headsets that they've had, and most of those involve some sort of really tight fitting cap, or like getting them like down and close is, as we all know, is hard. If even if you are shaving your head and like it doesn't I mean it's hard to get these sensors. I'm super curious. I mean, like even though they allowed for different head shapes, it wasn't clear how tightly that device would be, or how tightly you'd want it to be, whereas the Neurosity, where it's kind of like sitting. Well, I mean, can you move your head around? I mean, you can like throw it around.
So I'm kind of an edge case, I guess, after talking to AJ and Alex. I have, and I know this from buying sunglasses and hats, I have a large head.
Okay.
And so this thing, like when I put it on, it's like stretched at its max basically, and is like holding onto my head tightly. I was talking to AJ a couple of days ago, and he mentioned that a pretty consistent feedback they got is that it like falls back, like kind of tilts and falls backward on people. And I've never had that issue. I could walk around with it for a while and it won't fall off. It's actually like they're pushing an OS update this week that'll allow it to use the battery for 3 hours. And I was thinking about them, like, I would never do that because it's so tightly on my head after an hour of wearing it. I'm like, I need to take a break. So yeah, it's it holds on to me pretty tightly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have a strategy for talking about this, Morgan, but
Hey, I still have a question about Kernel. Was I just thinking of the MEG the whole time?
Well, that's the one that kind of looks. It might. It's the one that looks a bit more like the hockey mask, or certainly like original OPM systems used a kind of
Does somebody have a picture of? I've been looking for it.
It's called the Flux.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen a picture of the Flux, like the actual physical
Or is
product.
there a previous picture of the Flow? Just trying to see what they did with this iteration.
Well, honestly, I think the best picture of what it probably looked like is actually Kyle's, a picture of Kyle's lab, and because that's how it was, like that would be a very typical research system.
So the system that Kyle bought, is that better than this thing that those guys have made?
It's definitely, well, it's different. Now, I thought that certainly one of the really interesting things about what they presented that surprised me was that it was a completely wireless system. Like if you see the like Facebook Reality Labs, like their FNIRS is what looks like a really high quality, high price research system.
The Flow 50 says it connects with USB-C.
Yeah, they said it was the
That's how they
USB-C.
power it. That's how it charges.
That's
but
it.
It disconnects.
You mean the optical component is wireless?
Well, that it's supposed to, like they're trying to do almost everything on board.
Yeah.
And like you will have this USB-C cable because I don't think they're trying to get with Wi-Fi yet. I mean, you saw they did a little bit in terms of like, we're interested to work with designers in terms of like what it'll eventually look like, and probably
it'll be wireless eventually, but it's not yet. Like they haven't figured out the data transfer component yet.
But the fact that they've done the modular, I mean, they've made all the components kind of like fit in that kind of headset is already pretty remarkable. And
yeah, the design is super impressive. I mean, there's a lot of that in the video, like more so than the Neuralink demo. Like you really got a kind of idea of the physical unit, and and it, I mean, it looked robust, and they did the kind of takedown, and they had this really nice conversation, like live conversation with
David Boas.
David Boas, like the headhunter in the field, and he's like looking at the live optical signal on a screen and so on. And that was kind of convincing, actually, I thought. But and the signal properties seemed like he was impressed by the signal properties, right? But they didn't show much in terms of brain data.
No, they
had some really shitty like rendered activations from an NBAC task, and I was like, what are you trying to tell me there, that it just doesn't give you a regular
sense? It didn't make any sense.
Who thought that was okay to put in that bit in their opening play, that video?
It was awful because they show this video that's supposed to be real data over multiple days. There's nothing similar about any of the days.
Right.
Like, is this a task that is actually taking place over multiple days where it's like some days you're off and some days
And
you're
then
off?
they were saying like, and what's interesting is that you see different things on different days. Like, that's not good.
It's just like, and then the capper was, we think visualization is a really important component to learning about the brain. It's like, dude,
No shit.
that was not a good example.
So let's say they do visualize it and they've got a great visualizer and everything. How is anybody supposed to know what whole head FNIRS data looks like, much less what it means?
Well,
people who work
one
on
of the
it.
first devices. I mean, have they had it for 10 years? Has other labs had it for 10 years?
Yeah. So honestly, like their tech is what really was outstanding. Their tech, and I think what David was probably most impressed by was the actual throughput of the system, like what it could keep up with in terms of samples per second from all the detectors, right? So again, you're doing time domain, photon counting, where like it's across all these different modules. You're timing things so that you can get reliable signal from one pulse, right? And
so it looks like each little electrode maybe has 5 or 6.
It has 6. Yeah.
So
and
then they have to coordinate all of those. Yeah, that sounds pretty hard.
Yeah. And so they talked about they've got this like hierarchy of microcontrollers, and then a master controller that's doing the USB data out. But at some point at the very end, the one of the questions is, what do you do about confounding crosstalk? And she was like, we reduce the power. And it's
wait, between like two light sensors or 2 modules?
What she meant by that, I'm pretty sure was between 2 modules.
Huh.
So
the power or the sampling
the
rate?
active 2
They took
modules
the
act
sampling
working
rate down
next to each other
by multiplexing.
So what? As I understood it, yeah. I mean, they're, and we saw this a little bit with the NeurotechX system, right? If you remember this, I can't remember what the NeurotechX. So is Josh not with us? No. So if just remember this particular device, and there was a better picture, like to see the inside of that.
I have to ask, is it still the highest density?
Well, so I think so. I mean,
just wondered if this website just became obsolete.
Well, so I mean, I think though it speaks to some issues that like Colonel didn't actually get to today, which is like this focuses on the forehead because it doesn't have hair, right? And it was still totally unclear of how Colonel is actually dealing with a system. Like the only data that they collected was a guy holding a module against his head, right? And the NBAC task that they also included in the presentation, this multi-day data that again it was really unclear what we were even looking at, but all the activations were frontal.
And you could look at mental workload, I guess, from day to day on a dual in-back.
And again, like, you know, the history of FNIRS, which is very, very long, right? I mean, it's certainly going back to the 80s in terms of, you know.
How long have we had whole head of this technology?
Well, so again, like, partly nobody's had whole head due to a variety of technological issues, as well as, yeah, I mean.
Do we know a lot from doing regions one at a time?
So I mean, I'm using this particular example just to give you a sense of like how dense you can make it when you're not worried about hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't the best thing, but there's some other pictures of this that Josh has included in his presentations before, where you get to see the breakout of you know, emitters and detectors, and, you know, the interdigitation of emitters and detectors that they had, and the way in which they, you know, coordinate the timing so that, you know, you've got a light source that you can identify at a particular time active, and you know, you're focused on yeah, just trying to collect data from that particular emission, right? They talk about the fact that you couldn't actually get, and you know, this is why they talk about, or they have to talk about spatial resolution in terms of I mean, very, very wishy-washy about what the depth is, and you know, somewhat wishy-washy about what their actual spatial resolution is. So she said,
I guess maybe they're betting on analysis later to, if you just have so many electrodes, you can do source localization.
Well, they definitely talked about how they're using Monte Carlo techniques and diffuse. You know, you're modeling. They're using some of these techniques that were kind of pioneered by students of David Boaz. So Jinjing Fang in particular, and you know, just to their videos pale in comparison to let me just, so this is Jingjing Fang's work, you know, who's at I forget his lab name. It's like CATI. It's Center for Applied. Ooh, I'm not going to remember, but anyway, definitely, if you have MRI data, you can improve your estimation of you know, the hemoglobin with additional you know, like, you know, how much gray matter and white matter you've gone through, and what differences you should see with those. And anyway, and these are all done with these, you know, he's doing very fast with these GPU calculations. But to get depth, you have to look at sensors that are further apart, right? And so at a certain point, you're going to need to do two different you know, you're going to basically need to emit with one module and detect with a different module, right? And the issue there being that, of course, if you want to do that detection, then you're going to need to make sure that you're not doing the emission from that same module that you're trying to do this more distant calculation, right? So
it was like a math problem to make that work.
And again,
what do? Do you line it up like every 5 things, do 5 different types of tests in however many nanoseconds, and then
Yeah.
we can do that fast enough so that we get different types of reading at 200 hertz.
Yeah.
Maybe they're doing a trick like that. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's why they're saying like they say 200 hertz and they actually said, but in reality it's 30 hertz. It's like, so I think, yeah, but
which is very fast for blood flow signals. I mean, it's
still 30. That's still 30 times faster than I believe what Kyle's system is doing.
Right. What about MRI with contrast? What's the
MRI with contrast? So unless you're doing, so people who are say doing like retinotopic mapping and things like that, where they're doing a limited field of view, then maybe they can increase the samples per second. If you're doing, again, like fMRI whole brain, you've got to cover more space. And the one thing being that, like, at least you don't have to worry about depth. You're really covering that space, except in, areas around the sinuses and the ears where you're getting some signal dropout.
So fMRI, you'd typically getting 2 seconds, or these days between 2 and 1 second spatial temporal resolution.
It's like a really choppy video camera.
Right. But that the signal is a slow signal because it's a blood flow signal. So they're doing FNIRS, and they're still measuring blood flow, but now they're measuring blood flow at 30 hertz. So I mean, for sure, there's like information in blood flow signals below 1 hertz, or above 1 hertz in terms of frequency resolution, but not 30 times up, like maybe 5 hertz or something. So I don't know if they need that for just signal quality, or if there's rich information in there, or it's just excessively oversampled.
It's like, just maybe as a point of reference, an adult at rest without any heart problems or tachycardia might be 1 beat per second, 60 BPM.
So it seems like the dog.
So you're only getting some action every second, anyways, in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to. You do get.
But it's nice to see the full wave, though, of what's happening. Maybe instead of just snapshots, like a picture camera, more like a movie. So that sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's so I'm again, like, I think it would be great to get someone like Dr. Fang to come talk, and someone who's really involved with the tomography in terms of like how is this actually new in terms of whole head, because it's still kind of unclear because there's lots of people, and I've got some papers where people are they've got sensors covering the entire head.
If they found a way to do that, like referencing, you said, between 2 different modules across the whole head at the same time that'd be. I don't think they're doing that yet. You said all they did was show everybody 1 module, so that seems like they've got a lot of work.
Well, they showed us these videos again. Like, I wasn't the only one. John saw it and said the same thing, where it's just like it wasn't really clear what they were showing us in terms of like this real data that they were collecting.
I was super gunned about the whole thing. The tech looks awesome. All of the tech demonstrations look awesome, but the fact that the brain data was pretty lackluster is a bit of a red flag, because that's ultimately what they're doing with it, right? And it looked like it was just thrown together in like 5 minutes.
I mean, it honestly didn't. I mean, it looked like it could have been noise.
Oh.
Well, so yeah, I mean that maybe a bit, but I mean there was definitely like frontal activity, which would make sense, but it was
moving
there on like 1 in 4 days or something, and then it was kind of all over the place. And I mean, maybe they were just trying to be transparent. It's like, this signal's noisy, or this is what we're seeing, and we believe in this data. Fine, but who thought that was a good idea to put in their opening video? Yeah. Just one of those snapshots. They could have just averaged them, and then they would have had it would have averaged out to a frontal blob, and they could have just shown that. Yeah. But I guess these are somewhat nuanced criticisms at the end of the day.
Yeah, because
in lieu of like more information from them and more data and just more stuff.
So is the emitter a laser, you said?
Yeah.
And then there's
dual laser.
Some type of, what do they use to detect light?
Like a photomultiplier.
What on earth is that? Let me see.
Yeah, photo detector.
Yeah, I mean, I have the. Oh, a photomultiplier is
with a word that means that.
Yeah, it looks like a tube amp for light.
and I yeah. So check out the papers that I linked in the meetup agenda. The last one is what is it? It's like the Milan Polytechnic has done some of these more kind of like engineering of the system of time domain systems. And so that last paper's a good link for that. If you want to learn about the detectors and things like that. I thought the first link, the Academy of, what was it, the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences article is a great place to start if you're new to FNIRS. That is actually a 2020 paper. Oh. But I believe that's one of the areas in which they were really like making their own boards and perhaps even detectors, because that was one of the areas where it seemed like David Boaz was definitely impressed, and I'm seeing in terms of the Society for FNIRS Facebook group, people posting like, super impressive presentation today with, I think it was like 800,000 photon counts per second, or anyway, let me just pull up my notes.
It seemed kind of funny that David Boas didn't seem to know anything about their system, and they must have talked to him, right?
Well, I mean, like if there was one person you were going to have as your consultant, it would be David Boas.
It seemed a bit fishy that he would be completely naive.
But honestly, I mean, maybe they would have asked him about what people are doing now, but everything that they have been doing in stealth over these years is really been about their electronics. Like honestly, I mean, it kind of speaks to the who you would need, like the team that you would need to be working on like the next generation equipment, and whether that would be really, a neurophotonics group or a bunch of, double E's, right? Like I didn't know, I forget what his name was. Ryan, was it like Ryan Fields? I didn't know their technical lead. But I'm assuming that, it's a little like parandromics in the sense that, like, you kind of want a bunch of chip designers, right? Like, in the words of Neuralink's HR, no neuroscience required, right? And
it kind of showed.
Well, I think that's what Catherine was there for. Like she's coming out of Boston Children's, and I'm pretty sure doing like infant FNIRS. Yeah, so I'm kind of willing to believe, like he hadn't actually seen what what their new specs were. But at the same time, like he knew all the important questions to ask in terms of like, so yeah, when this is pointed at the table as opposed to your head, what do you think you should be getting?
Yeah. How do you spell this David Boaz person's name?
Boas.
Is it just? Oh, okay.
So, and he was a student of Britton Chance's, who was kind of
with
like
a Z. It's pulling up some investor person.
No, with an S, and he's at the Neurophotonics Center at BU. So he was at MGH for like 20 years. And
I found the video finally.
And yeah, and like again, like his thesis advisor at UPenn was Britton Chance, who was kind of like a pioneer of NIRS when it was in a more single or two channel systems back in the 80s. I think late 80s, Britton Chance had his papers, but sorry, just notes. So just to jump to what I thought was, like the big question for me was that so they're making 50 systems available next year. You put in an application. The top 10 are going to get their systems for free, and the next 40 will pay $5,000.
Right, which can't be what they're intending to sell it for, right?
Well, I mean, in your mind, is that too much or too little?
Too little.
I mean, so you think that they're selling that at a loss?
I thought, I mean, especially since they're not producing at scale, but even just in terms of the the manufacturing, the build of that device by itself, and given that it's a piece of electronics, like $5,000 seemed like a good deal.
Right.
I couldn't. Yeah, I can't.
Well,
I don't know. I was surprised by that number. And if someone said like that's their target market price,
yeah,
I would be bowled over by that and probably be buying one.
Well, so I honestly think that's like, I mean, when you think about it as like that's a DSLR camera, right? Like a high-end DSLR camera. I mean, they sunk in a lot. This is a company that got to spend, majorly to develop.
DSLR camera will show you facial expressions.
Sure, but like that if you had $50 to $100 million to develop these boards. Maybe at this point you could, if your goal wasn't to actually recover that 50 to 100 million, but just to sell something that
it's probably like a Willy Wonka, golden ticket scenario with the price.
Well,
that has to be what they're doing.
Well, certainly what they do say is that they're choosing people for this Flow 50 that will basically develop new markets for them, right? So like I still, I mean, I totally wonder. I want to believe that they've managed to have a system that they can manufacture at that cost. Whether they are making any, like again, like I think the idea is that the company's not going to make money off of the devices.
So they need to create the research by basically giving it to labs for free. And they're just going to be extra nice to the first 10.
Yeah, I
That's
think
normally the deal.
Maybe it's like $5,000 worth of support. I mean, worth of user support per person answering their questions on how to get started. Means
so
because you're saying it's, I've been coming to these meetings for a while, and never really talked about whole head FNIRs.
Well, you will be now.
Yeah, I mean, again, like let me just show you some pictures of sorry, I got the I looked through all the references that well, here's that still doesn't that's an EEG.
So any bright ideas?
Oh yeah, here's the let me just show you this so is that clear, or let me okay, so here's like that certainly
So if you wanted to remove the cables, it would have to be some big old box around your head like that.
Well, that's the impressive thing to me in terms of if they can really make this work with a USB cable. Again, like I think they've really, made a contribution to the field. Again, like I want to just say that like they've done that at extreme cost. like they put a lot of money into developing this, where from someone who has always said since like the 2014 or 2015, like that this is much more than just a business for him, and so whether you want to call it like maybe seeding a business, but I think it's honestly something that he would just like to see happen and make available technology to psychiatry that will make a difference. I don't want to put too much in the footage that he showed at the beginning, but certainly like he tells a very personal story about why he's interested in this kind of technology, at least going back to like 2015. And
so what footage at the beginning?
Well, the footage at the beginning of the presentation today, where he's like watching TV and wearing this helmet.
Okay.
So is David Boaz the older fellow?
Well, David Boaz appears with the Neurophotonics Center as its backdrop.
Who's the young fellow who's on the video most of the time?
That's perhaps Brian Johnson, but then at some point it's the technical lead. I want to say
Brian Fields.
Yeah.
Is this guy just a business person, or does he have a?
No, he's an engineer of some description.
Yeah.
He's the product lead.
Anyway, I mean, I just wanted to show this picture because like you can find lots of examples of this where it certainly looks like people are collecting what I would call whole brain or whole head data. It's just important to remember the way in which you interdigitate the emitters and the detectors, and how close. I mean, they're really going for a target kind of distance, and that target distance is giving them it's giving you a kind of like lower bound on your depth, because the closer the emitter and the detector are, the less depth you're getting, right? So let me just show you one other. Then see if I can find here's the review paper.
Hey everyone, I gotta leave. Sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'll connect again.
Please. Yeah, we'll see you on Slack.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
See ya.
Good night.
See you later. Bye.
So have you got any brain maps in this paper or source maps or anything?
In this review paper?
Yeah.
Not of the. I'll pull up a Fang paper in just a minute, because he has the best tomography papers. But this is just a demonstration of how distance begets depth, right? And why there's this, there's going to be at a certain point an issue about getting, if you really wanted to get, greater distance with the flow, that you'd need to manage this intermodule communication, or you need to include the intermodule timing so that you're not getting crosstalk. Anyway, this is what's at the heart of her statement, that we're just getting cortical sources. And then they talked up about all the things that are in fact in the cortex. like that still gives us a lot. But let me just real quick pull up. So I looked through all the papers that they had listed in their references or applications section, and it's kind of a weird mix, honestly. I mean, definitely some things about capturing cognitive load. And
I made it through a whole. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I made it through a whole education. I saw the earlier device that did FNIRS and went across the forehead, and they had a picture of a child's device. And I went through a whole education degree, and I never heard about anybody collecting brain data while kids perform different tasks. Not to look at the brain, but to look at which tasks you should be giving kids. And you know if a kid did something right with the assessment. We don't need a brain device to do that. Kids have been taking tests for centuries. But it'd be great to see if they can get a better score faster with, I don't know, less cognitive load. I don't know. See, it's unclear to me what would be the best scenario. No, I never heard of people doing research like that. Maybe the people that are doing that are too busy looking at the brain rather than looking at how to modify the education. Not like a creepy way to make the kids be focused all the time, like that Chinese thing, but as a research thing to make research-based education methods.
Well, that was kind of what the clip at the start was getting at a little bit. It was this little this little reel of him sat around in his nice apartment with the thing on, and I think he was reading at some point, and they got like a text message or something, or some message came up on his screen. It's like, Brian, your brain focus is not optimal. Consider changing tasks. So he put down his computer or something and picked up a book. And it was like, Brian, we think your brain data suggests that you would enjoy a science fiction.
Book. In education, we call them brain breaks, and typically the teacher looks around the classroom and you see that more than half of the class is distracted or not engaged with you at the current moment, and then you say, okay, time for a brain break, or usually you have them scheduled ideally, and then you just go over to a board and like pick a random thing that takes 30 seconds and you go right back to the activity. You don't need more than 30 seconds of distraction to give your brain a break. And the best brain breaks also involve kinesthetics, moving your body, dancing for a little bit to a song, something like that.
Yeah. So, that seemed very, it seemed like a marketer's idea of how this device was going to work. Very far from the kind of the research studies that they, the kind of research labs that they seem to be trying to get to, apply for Flow 50. So
did you get the impression that's who they wanted? To me, it sounded like they wanted people with business, ideas.
You know why people aren't doing the education route? It's because there's no money in it. My goodness. Same as always.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, certainly they mentioned this in terms of, just this is a recent paper by Jinjing Fang with his students, and just to quickly show you what. This is a 2020 paper where here's a breakdown of these different tools that you might recognize if you've ever done like TES modeling, so breaking, using structural MRI to do, to capture skull, to capture skull, gray, white, etc. And he's got his own tools for doing some of these things, but that leads us, so this is where you've made a finite element model, using, let's say in the case of F, you're basing it on a free surfer model, so this is at some point they said, like, if you're a lab familiar with these kinds of techniques, then please get in touch with us. And I was like, I'm sure David Boaz would be like, you need to get in touch with with Jinjing Fang. That's what I still thought, that they recognize that they're basically making devices for researchers and not like, consumer BCI devices. But then again, like, there have been companies that are out of touch with what their technology, we don't have to go much further than say Magic Leap to say, like, sometimes a company has a very different idea about what they think the applications will be for versus, what the technology is really ready to do.
So what exactly was Magic Leap doing wrong?
Well, in that, it wasn't going to be a mass market device. Like, they weren't going to sell, 2 million of them. They were lucky to sell, like a couple thousand of them, right? And you know, if you kind of knew that in advance, and then I mean, this is one reason why research device companies have a system cost that is like several $100,000, even though the equipment doesn't cost that to make, right? And it's because they know that they're only going to sell like a couple hundred a year, and they've got to support, you know, a bunch of scientists and a bunch of, you know,
You mean, is Magic Leap making this spatial computing thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just using them as a particularly recent example of a company that you know burned through an incredible sum of I think like 1.5 billion, or they had massive funding to create a device that in some ways is truly novel, right? But was never going to be. It never had the ability to break through into the consumer market and sell several thousand, several million devices, but could potentially be something which was, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, funny thing is, like the other example that comes to mind is MEG. And that's the other thing that Kernel are doing.
I know, right? and it kind of made more sense when I mean, I seem to remember, you know, like it seems like 6 months ago or maybe a little bit longer, like Kernel was going to be a service company, right? It was neuroscience as a service, right? Like I thought that they weren't even going to, you know, they weren't even about making.
Maybe they still are, and
systems. Well, I gotta say, like the fact that they had video where this person is wearing this helmet and free of tether was a remarkably bold statement about where they think this is going. Now, I do want to say, and they said very clearly that this would be in everybody's home by, what was it, 2031, 2033? Like, you know,
are you kidding me? They're trying to be a 20-year, whatever the word is for people that can see the future.
You know, like
A Bill Gates.
It's good to have, you know, 10-year plans. Right? You know, it's good to think long term.
Yeah, every home,
and yeah, every home. So
if they're selling them for, you know, whatever it scales down from $5,000, like
yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean, like, here's my dream is that like it actually costs them.
What's the largest? What's the largest component? Is it that? Is it the laser or the photo multiplier?
I want to say it's the laser, or well, yeah, I want to say it's the laser because what they talked about was that like getting the laser generator to do the very short pulses was the really big box. And yeah. And we see this in all the research systems. So again, when Kyle showed us his particular setup, it was it was like a big rack system with like lots of cables off. And yeah. So
and that was to get the power for the lasers. So maybe they found some laser magic, like a. How are they powering the lasers with where'd they put the battery?
Right. I mean, so
or maybe
they said they were going to do a breakdown, and then it never quite became the breakdown I was expecting. Or like I wanted to see that helmet be taken apart and see like how big are those microcontroller boards versus is there a battery pack, or was he basically wearing a brick in the beginning videos and that any time you're actually using that particular system, that like you'd obviously have a USB-C cable at minimum. Right, because at this point, I'm assuming. I mean, honestly, like I'm less concerned about how they would get that device to be Wi-Fi than I am about like how heavy would the battery packs be, and again, like how heavy would that device be sitting on your head, and like
Like
why?
I've played with cat laser pointers, and that's the smallest laser we can get in a store, and it doesn't use one tiny battery; it takes 4 of them.
And again, like, and this is it's a very different device, and getting like having that timing and that pulse be super accurate is like key to the whole time domain system, right? So it's getting that and capturing with the detector, capturing the distribution of arrivals with the detector is how you're forming your signal.
I feel like they have at least one person with a degree in optics or lasers.
I think they've got like
that's got to be foundational to their success.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that like of those 100 employees, quite a few are dedicated to that. Yeah, so just wanted to. Well, I wanted to cover that today. I'm trying to put together, a better kind of slides presentation, but honestly, only knew about the speaker last night. So yeah, gonna finish up a kernel and TD FNIRS presentation that will hopefully capture that a little better.
So Morgan, like any bright ideas
in terms of like applying?
Yeah.
Well, I think I so I thought it was interesting. I mean, certainly something we didn't talk about that they mentioned, which is that you can get the system with 8 active electrodes. So now it was unclear, like, can I put them anywhere? Or, yeah. So it would be interesting to obviously expand that. It's a weird system though with the module, like by making the modules these hexagonal fixed components, they it makes it a little harder to interdigitate EEG. Like when you see some of these EEG NIRS systems, like you can put the electrodes between the emitter and the detector, and these you can't, right? So
well, they did say they're modular though, right? So you can
work around them. I mean, you can work around them, which is kind of okay, because then it's like, yeah, you're not really relying on intermodule communication anyway, so even better. But it doesn't really allow you. EEG's got crappy resolution, spatial resolution too, and like what would make it, the kind of like ideal system to be really getting at is to getting at like true kind of like neurovascular coupling is to do it the old way. I don't think. I mean, I'm just guessing that like one of the kind of like design choices that they had was making these fixed distance devices, because then you can probably simplify a bunch of basically on the module you're doing a bunch of calculations that that are kind of guaranteed, because it's like what's around it, right? And like other systems, you're designing that once it's all collected at the end, right? And again, maybe that's also why those modules, even though it might have cost tens of millions to develop them, that those modules could now actually be much lower cost, in that it's like some electronics are doing some of those calculations.
Right.
So I just watched the. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I agree with you, Morgan. One of the things that seemed like an interesting scientific application would be to try and do the FNIRS equivalent of concurrent fMRI EEG. But to do that properly, you would want high density EEG, because you would want to be working in source space with both modalities.
Absolutely.
So 8 channels is otherwise that would be awesome, right? If you could have a high density EEG and a high density FNIRS.
And this is an FNIR system built for source space, right? Like absolutely,
So yeah. I watched the beginning of the video listening to y'all and just put it on mute, and it's kind of perverted. If I'm gonna, basically, the computer is telling him how to live his life.
Oh yeah,
it's weird. The opening video is
every
weird.
Example, it says they start.
Some of those messages were from Slack, and it was just like, wow, like
no, I mean, about that with like existing companies silencing notifications. One can already do that, but it starts with craving control, and then it goes to entertainment. It says it recommends entertainment for him. Like, how is that an ideal society where you live in your home? There's no social interaction from what I've seen. At least in the example that you shared, what were they doing? I loved that activity. It was whole head FNIRS on 2 people synced and eye gazing, and they just asked them to look at each other. Sounds like a meaningful thing for people to do even without technology on their heads. You know what I mean? They just wanted to, and I think they just wanted to see that each person was looking at the other person. That's what it said. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is like to be honest, like my next art project, I thought about having the computer, tell me what to do. But that's like an art project, not my life.
But this
I want the computer.
This is their customer base, right? This is like at least half of the people they're talking to are people in the private sector and the tech sector who work in
and they want that control,
capitalism industries, and this is they want to know how this fits into that. And the other half,
somebody's going to pervert that, right?
How the brain works.
They're going to intercept that message, and then they're not just going to tell you what area is active. They're going to process it and say, like with the horror movie, like I think it said, you want this type of movie. They're going to give you the type of movie that fits that and their new release.
Well,
they're going to run it through the business filter.
Again, like for those of us who are actually familiar with the kind of research that these systems are based on, or that doesn't really exist.
But they showed it in the video.
That's never going to happen. That's not going to happen in the next 10 years. And if it does, it'll be like 100% bullshit.
Let's not forget that that Brian is based in LA. And the kinds of discussions, I mean, like the number one topic for this kind of BCI in LA is what is basically like the kinds of things that Nielsen is working on, which is like how to neuromarketing of TV and films, right?
They really want to know when you start tuning out,
but they don't, right? Like this is the big lie, is that they don't, right?
They're trying, but there's no
there at this point. And yeah, and it's still better to ask somebody what they're, it's like, can you get them to label like 100 TV shows and movies? Is like, that is better data to predict what some new show that they'll want to watch than it is.
Yeah, if somebody's been impulsively watching TV that you just jut right in front of their face, you ask them immediately after, they give you a pretty accurate response, I guess.
So I just wanted to talk about a few other things, although like if you've got more questions on kernel, chime in too, or
Isn't there open FNIRS? Is that the HEG thing? HEG Arduino?
No,
something else.
So open there's open NeRs, right? Which is the original project, and that was Alexander von Lohmann back in like 2014, 2015. And these are all wearable systems. Then von Lohmann actually started as a postdoc in David Boaz's lab, and then they started, or David started Open FNIRS, and openfnirs.org has the new system that they're working on, which is Ninja NeRs. And again, if you check the OpenFNIR channel on Slack, I've got the YouTube video, the very recent YouTube of Alexander von Lohmann talking at NeurotechX or iMotion, or he's talking at some company webinar, but discusses his what he and David are working on. It's definitely focused on being a wearable device, and it's focused on like something that works now, not in 2030. So it's got a much more how would you call it? It's a much more humble specification, but definitely check it out, and and check the chat for Josh is posting some links. Yes, yeah. So this is what Josh is talking about trying to do with playing with hardware within the kind of scope of free EG32. I think that would be, even again, if it's, I don't know how it's related to written topic mapping. Well, I mean, so it's certainly a joke.
Mapping of the human visual cortex.
Sure. Okay, so Joe Culver, yeah. Awesome. And was he doing that? Is this somebody? Did they shave the back of the person's head?
I imagine they did.
I think there's there's a bunch of them where I wouldn't be, like Abik, there's some people will do a lot for their science, and yeah, it doesn't actually mention it. I think it would be great to ask. I'm happy to ask.
That paper's awesome though, because you can see in the images they got, you can already start to see the hemispheres and even kind of some of the wrinkly stuff in the brain. It's only
Oh
pointing.
no, that's their measurements.
You think so?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's still kind of split though, in the middle at least.
That's their, like this
That's
is
just how
like
they map it.
people looking at joint time frequency plots of EEG and seeing stuff. And it's like,
Okay.
no, that's not what.
Well, it's still cool looking.
It's cool. It's cool looking. I don't want to take away from it, but like fMRI as barely at 7 Tesla has achieved something that is equivalent of it's basically called layer fMRI. What you're seeing there are just the idiosyncrasies of the sensor placement and the the depth and things like that.
Okay.
But what it's a great paradigm. Retinotopic mapping is still a great paradigm to use, because you know what I mean, it's visual psychophysics, right? So you know what is happening in the cortex with particular timing, and you can record that. What's impressive is if you can pull out the timing of your stimulation, right? And it's kind of the same trick. It's the fMRI equivalent of doing steady state VEPs, right? In that it's a very known input. You know what's going to happen in the brain. I mean, it's I don't know if that's the best explanation, but anyway, this would still be really cool to do on your forehead, right? And I don't know what time you joined, Josh, but I was talking about that Soterix device, which it's got like the 200 channels
or 730. Anyway, no, I got it in the tail end of your kernel talk. I watched that talk though. That was pretty interesting.
Cool. So is there a reason for 1068 is your LED?
Oh, I was just saying that one paper you sent me.
Okay, they were much lower. They were like 670 and 850, weren't they?
Yeah, well, those are the usual wavelengths. That's in that paper. I mean, you can use any of them really.
Okay.
Far red is you get less pulse noise.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I haven't really experimented enough with this yet.
Well, I'm again love to see this.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, awesome. So, unfortunately, Jaden had to go, but just wanted to talk about Jaden. Jaden started the Neurorobotics SIG, or Neurorobotics meeting. That's Tuesday at 5 p.m. Potentially at 6 if, again, seeing what works best for people. Some people are joining from Michigan, so in Cynthia Chestik's lab. So I think there's some accommodation to the fact that like this meeting, like not everybody's on the West Coast, but yeah, great. Great to have a group, especially with a bunch of roboticists who are also joining, and we kind of covered the Ross Neuro papers and what we and of course this the Nengo low power AI paper, which I believe I put a link in last week, but let me just really quickly. Anyway, check Slack in terms of the check the Neurorobotics Slack channel for any updates on that. It's also where I've been putting in links and meetings. Like last weekend was, the Open Source Robotics Foundation, which develops ROS and Gazebo, and there was a code sprint kind of hackathon of Ignite or Ignition. Anyway, this is like the next generation, like ROS 2 kind of development. And again, check the Slack channel for those, which I'm going to do right now because I can't find a link to that Nengo paper. But
Morgan, with the robotics group, so yeah, you said you discussed some things, but did you discuss like what the objectives of the group are in a broad sense? Like, are they either going to be building stuff, hardware, software? Like, is it strategic anyway?
Yeah, so I think some people are interested in building stuff, and so it wouldn't surprise you to hear that the roboticists were interested in building stuff, and the brain people, or I should say, the people who are coming at this from more brain science, were more interested in simulations and really understanding the role or the what spiking neural networks add to control systems, and how do spiking neural networks differ from like deep reinforcement learning techniques in terms of, say, training a robot's control system?
That's an interesting question. That's first. It's almost like, well, it is niche robotics, right? Robotics.
That to me is the neuro robotics, right?
Right.
So the ROS neuro is is the reverse, where it's just like we're basically adding EEG to a robotics project, right?
Hey, Morgan.
Yeah.
So can you repeat when that's gonna be?
Yeah, that's Tuesday at 5, or it was this week, Tuesday at 5 p.m. Join Diego, you're in the group already, or you're in the channel, right?
I hope so. I'm gonna check.
I think you are. So, if that time doesn't work, because I don't think you get home until after 6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so at least say that to the in the group, because that would be like I was saying, like the only issue is that at least 2 of them are joining from Michigan, which I don't think is I think it's Central Time. Forget yeah.
Yeah, we can Google it.
But anyway, check that out, as well as I'm not seeing it, but John, I put in something that wouldn't surprise the author of which wouldn't surprise you at all, because where did that go? Dan Goodman, or is it? Yeah, Dan Goodman did this just like a month ago.
Okay, the Brian guy.
Yeah. So this spiking neural networks workshop, and so there's that particular thing, and then
That's cool.
this is the well, and then I dropped in the meetup agenda. I dropped in a link to the paper on this survey of robotics control based on learning inspired spiking neural networks is a follow up. It's from the people at Technical University of Munich who are basically the kind of like the main academic force, or were the original academic force behind the Neurobotics Human Brain Project platform, right? And anyway, so I thought this was interesting. Like, this is why I've got to find the Nango paper now. This is why the Nango paper was also interesting in that, again, it's just another way to build SNNs, that are kind of like have particular. I mean, if anything, like Nango is a particularly white box like toolkit.
Hey, I have a question about that before you move on. Is spiking neural networks, what I'm reading about it from this paper you just posted, is that supposed to be machine learning's attempt at intuition?
It's
because it basically gets a neural network and adds impulsivity, and that's pretty freaking advanced, if you ask me.
It's not impulsivity. It's pulses.
Okay.
So it's rather the communication between the nodes in the network occurs in pulsed, brief pulses or spikes, rather than continuously valued. Continuous. It's discrete time, right? But continuous valued linear multiplications.
Because I'm looking at the also this other paper for like deep image reconstruction that was just posted. And like with a lot of neural networks, you give it more data and then it tends towards what it thinks is correct or not correct. And then you just have this one outlier, which has to be correct, but it ignores it because it doesn't fit 100,000 other samples. Whereas a human would say, you know what, that one's so unique, that one has to be its own little case. I don't know.
Well, so
there's some impulsivity that comes from human learning and intuition to say that that's something different and that I have to categorize that as something else. And then you instantly try to infer what that is.
Well, I highly recommend the podcast that I linked at the beginning of the meetup agenda with Ken Stanley, who's now at OpenAI, talking about open-endedness. Some of his particular work on AI and machine learning is really interesting in trying to get at what I would call like really human approaches, or what makes general AI so frigging hard. Check him out and check out some of his papers, because they really do stand somewhat apart from the kind of the mainstream. And that anyway, I did.
Yeah, his papers are really good. I've read a couple.
Yeah.
I've also, one nice thing when stuff is actually open is a lot of the AI meetups in the Bay Area, they like talking about this stuff. Like I've had a couple conversations about trying to make AIs that get distracted and then analyze why they get distracted. Pretty much.
But at some point,
give
they're good. I mean, ADHD
Yeah.
isn't all that bad in humans.
Yeah, and it allows for connections. Like I have weird type ADHD, and like it's very light, but I can end up on these very distant tracks, and then I can trace back what happened to get me there, and in like figure out what logical conclusions I had to make to get there. And if an AI could do that, I think it would be able to understand what certain situations are a problem for it and how to train out of those issues.
Look, if we're just talking about ADHD in humans, there's this other part about it that most people don't think of. I mean, whether you've got inattentive or hyperactive, I've taught plenty of students with ADHD who can also hyperfocus at times.
Yeah.
Which seems like, but it's part of it. And like whenever a stimulant kicks in, let's say Adderall or Ritalin, as soon as it kicks in, usually that kicks in if they take it with their breakfast, an hour to hour and a half. Isn't that right, Morgan?
Yeah.
With that.
Sorry.
At least for me.
I know you've looked into some psych meds, but I think for most, even extended release, at about 2 hours after you're feeling the full effects of it. And the kids will like totally hone in. But then, they can also hyper focus whenever they're not on medication too. If it's something that really piques their interest, or yeah, it's
so I'm just trying to find. I'm trying to find a book that was a part of this Royal Society. He was talking about 6 books, and one of which was written by this neuroatypical woman, as she described herself, who is also like a super young PhD working on translational bioinformatics and doing some really interesting stuff that I got to say I was very I wanted to follow up on that book too. I mean, they were all interesting books, as you can imagine, but just wanted to keep on the subject of spiking neural networks and really get at this question of, well, so what exactly like certainly they were an attempt to build a more biologically realistic neural network to some degree, right? And so neuromorphic computing. And so what I wanted Diego to join us to talk about a little bit is that that we've been building up a small collection of papers and links. And as a part of the Human Brain Project, another platform of the Human Brain Project is neuromorphic computing. This is talked about in the Nengo low-powered AI hardware for robust embedded neurobotics paper. I've got a link in the. There's actually a free book available that I put in the agenda that describes the Spinnaker project from University of Manchester, and I think it's a big read, yeah. So there's a bunch of neuromorphic computing that is very much focused on kind of what I would call almost like technical considerations. Like one of the things that chip designers look at the brain and say is like, damn, it's so energy efficient, right? And obviously they're talking about it as kind of an engineering problem. Like, how can we make such energy efficient chips, right? That still get stuff done, but at much lower power draws. And like yes, it's interesting. Yes, it pushes the technology. Yes, there's some really interesting projects at NIST in terms of chips that operate at like super low temperatures and like barely rise, barely raise the temperature at all because of their like incredibly low power demands. But in terms of what is really interesting, or what I think is interesting for us, is in this like interface between multiple domains, is how they really differ in the behavior from deep neural nets, and in the kind of new architectures that we're seeing in neural nets in general. Like that's what I'd like to better understand. I'd like to better understand what role. I mean, I think it's interesting to look at some of the some of the applications papers that have come out from both the neurorobotics group or platform at Human Brain Project, as well as the neuromorphic computing, and especially the ones that try and merge those. They do talk about, in this paper, they talk about Lohi from Intel, but they also talk about Spinnaker. And there's a Nengo interface for Spinnaker. Yeah, I just want to say that, and it does relate to what John and I might be a bit more familiar with, which is like neural circuit papers, and where people are focused on not like whole brain, but like kind of specific subsets of areas, and those areas interconnectivity and kind of behavior.
Yeah, like the thing that the guys, Chris Smith and co, are famous for is the work that they did over I guess 10 years or so around this simulation called Spawn that was built on their platform called Nengo, that uses this conceptual framework called NIF.
Yes.
The Neural Information Framework. But
yeah.
Broadly speaking, like Spawn is a kind of brain simulation that does about 5 different cognitive tasks.
Uh-huh.
It does like a object recognition, it does action selection, it does motor control, and the kind of robotic arm type motor control, and 1 or 2 other things.
Yeah.
And it does all of those things in the sense that there are basically kind of sub modules that do each of those things.
Yeah.
And it kind of they can stitch together composite behaviors that involve parsing images and then doing reaching towards images, right? So that's kind of composed 2 things.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure how they do the composition, but really to your point, Morgan, like the circuits that they have that implement these behaviors, these are all kind of somewhat functionally specialized, kind of hand-tuned, a hypothesis laden like models of how certain things like action selection are implemented by the basal ganglia. Right?
Yeah.
And that's but it's interesting because that's really nothing to do with where they're going now, which is really neuromorphic computing for like low energy AI, or at least on the face of it, that's a different direction. But the connection between the two is spiking neural networks. Because Nengo and Spawn were like based on spiking neural networks and based on making spiking neural networks do useful functional things. And so then now they've been like taking that they developed more in the kind of computational neuroscience domain, and there's a whole new world of AI, low energy AI applications and neuromorphic hardware applications that have opened up and there's a company now that are doing this, and I think life is going swimmingly for those guys. Like timing, everything is just great for them.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly you'll see in this this particular paper, which it just came out in October, right? And it's a nice overview of what they have been doing, and is really explicit about like, yeah, that this I think it's NEF. Is it NEF?
Neural engineering framework.
Yeah, neural engineering framework, which is the white box toolkit, and in that, like, you kind of know. I mean, it sounds to me a lot like building Simulink circuits, right? I mean, that, like, you kind of know these unit behaviors, and the way in which you link them up, you get these control systems, which is totally what Simulink is for. It's funny because the robotics guys that joined from Michigan were talking about, like, hey, like, all of our, would you be surprised to know that, like, all of our robotic and exoskeleton and robotic arms are all running on dedicated Simulink, basically dedicated Simulink PCs, from, like, MATLAB 2012 or something like that. And I was like, no, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm pretty sure, a Siemens scanner still runs a Windows 95. Wait, is it WinNT4? Anyway, but yeah, I mean, that's what I thought of when they were talking about, like, we would build this thing and we know what it's not that we know what it will do, but, like, each component has this expected behavior, and even though they link some of their vision systems in these particular examples, sorry if you haven't looked at this, but even though they might link their visual system to some deep neural net to do object recognition, or implement some sort of autoencoder, but then they would quite rightfully say, well, but that's a kind of a black box in terms of what it's actually doing.
Anyway. I think one of the things that, it's been a while since I read about what the neural engineering framework is really about, but I think broadly speaking, it's a mathematical framework for mapping certain transformations.
Yeah.
Defined in linear coordinates onto architectures of spiking neural networks. And if you can express the, some core, like, functional behavior of the system you're trying to model in that simple linear transformation formulation, then it'll kind of give you the first stab, or, like, the outline of the neural network architecture.
So is that the
otherwise you would have to just, you wouldn't know how to build that otherwise. Like, you find it by trial and error or some other means, but that's kind of a shortcut that in some ways it's not very biological, and that's one of the things it's sometimes criticized for. It's a bit like kind of hacking together artificial neural networks, but hacking together spiking neural networks in a way that isn't, like, driven by core biological organizational understandings about biological organization. But in the kind of applied AI context, that doesn't matter in the slightest. So,
right. So let me see if I can put pieces together. Is it that since neurons fire electrical impulses, they want to try to do that with a neural net that can fire pulses?
Yeah, that's what the Spinnaker chips do. They're
When
literally
y'all said Spinnaker,
passing.
I looked up a Spinnaker robot. That's a lab robot.
Now,
There's so many things.
Hey,
again,
Richard.
check the link on the meetup agenda, and you can see a link to the Spinnaker book.
Right, and Richard, yes, because I hear you're very passionate about the questions, and look for the word memristor.
Yeah.
I think look for the word memristor on in Google.
I've looked at it before, but it's hard to not really.
Yeah, because it's very physics driven.
Yeah.
However, yes, what you are putting together in your head is exactly that. They are trying to replicate the brain in hardware.
But this is my first time thinking about the spiking neural networks. I'm still looking at
Yeah, and it's a complex concept, so you're going to have fun looking for that information. But I just wanted to jump in because I hear you and I kind of see myself in your, in your enthusiasm, and I think I'm kind of in the same train of thought. Like, how is this even possible? Human beings are this precious thing, or this super special thing. How is it that I can replicate that? The experience, feelings, emotions, the sense of self and being aware of yourself, all of that. These guys are pushing really hard to do that. And for example, that's from the hardware perspective. And you can go to general artificial intelligence, not just AI, but GAI. And that's based on coding and obviously more than that. But so you have kind of these two poles, like super hardware driven, and you have these memrisors, for example, and you have these other people that are trying to come up with something abstract, that is able to replicate the human experience. It's badass. And that's it. I don't want to talk more. Nice meeting you. Bye.
So, and then, again, like there are particular meetings that are focused on this topic, and probably the most famous is this, which I'm gonna post, or oh Lord. Give me 1 second to copy this into Chrome. Well, let me see if I. Okay, so this is the Telluride Neuromorphic Engineering Workshop that was just recent. Like, was it August? But of course, the Nengo group, Applied Brain Research did something associated with that, and yeah, there's a lot of cool projects that are kind of perfect in terms of marrying all the new developments in silicon fabrication with our best understanding of neural tissue as well. And so some of the spintronic memristor work is super hard to understand. But at scale, they are trying to, create physical devices that mimic, our kind of like stereotyped neuronal behavior. Yeah. And just wanted, in the last minutes that we have, to go over all the other things that have been happening this week. Finishing up on the neuromorphic computing and neurorobotics. Next week is IROS, by the way, which is the big ROS meeting, big robotic operating system meeting. It is free. You can register here at iros.org 2020. And again, there's some cool projects that'll be covered. And like join us on Tuesdays. The Nengo paper has a GitHub project associated with it, so you can run their code examples. And Nengo is supported on Human Brain Project's Neurobotics platform. So what I think we can do is we can basically we should be able to bring their robot into the neurobotics.net and run it using not only their, basically run it on Human Brain Project's computers. And what's cool about that is that they add environments and complex environments. So, in this particular paper, there's just kind of like a red dot that jumps around, and then the robot kind of steers itself towards the red dot. In neurobotics.net, there's a lot more like objects that you've got to route around. You can have complex landscapes, and you can even have water and other kind of other physics to the environment itself.
I have a pretty advanced question before we go for the night. Has anybody can you mix a spiking neural network with a generative adversarial network?
Yes.
That seems like a dangerously good combination for art. And I searched Google for spiking neural network and art, and practically nothing came up. It takes a couple of years for these to propagate to the art community, anyways.
Well, definitely lots of GANs in art projects.
Yeah, because you basically like pitting one thing against another and getting an output. It's great.
And Jeffrey Howard, who's the lead of Fast AI, was talking about all his proteges that have ended up at Adobe, and the recently released neural features for I think in a beta release of Adobe Photoshop. That are all pretty impressive and are definitely using a bunch of DNN techniques. So if you just it's like neural filters, Adobe. There's a bunch of stuff that came out this week.
And there are people that are just playing with mixing different types of neural networks.
Well, check out like Deep Dream and other projects where
well, it's just
there's a lot of artwork associated with deep neural network stuff. But yes, what is particularly interesting are so in this Nengo paper, Nengo is not only this white box SNN tool, but it also has interfaces to both deep neural networks as well as compiles to hardware-based neuromorphic computing devices. But some of the really interesting papers from the Human Brain Project are linking, Nengo and spiking neural networks together with hierarchical temporal modeling. So like Numenta's kind of architecture and other.
What did you just say? Hierarchical temporal modeling? Is that supposed to be like executive functioning?
Well, no, it's actually a little like,
just trying to see what they're trying to replicate.
First, let me make sure I'm getting the Numenta.
Because I know in the front part of our brain, I think that's where we do executive functioning, understanding which tasks we need to do first. Like if you're gonna make a sandwich, you understand you need to get the bread out of the bag first.
So this is Numenta's numenta.org, the HTM, and they like to use. I mean, again, like it reminds me of Nango, in that it's definitely pushing this biologically inspired architecture. More so than I don't know if it's appropriate to call like deep neural networks more a physics based approach, or
I think deep neural networks are more like a divide and conquer mathematical solution.
I think like the architecture has definitely gotten a lot more complicated, but it's not just scaling. It's not just scaling of network depth, and yeah. Anyway, this is exactly why I am interested to follow up with others and Diego in terms of what are spiking neural networks actually doing, and how does that relate to something like HTM, which certainly HTM has definitely been used for a lot of like anomaly detection, and I do believe it's related to what is it? Is it? I just get this. This is it. Short term, no, short long term memory.
LTSM, long term short memory, LSTM, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely
I've used that one in Max. I think there is a package in Max called ML Star, and it's got a handful of things. One of the easiest things to use in art is Markov.
Short term memory, right? So again, like
Rosenblatt, right? Or no,
yeah.
The other guy, not Green. Sorry.
Was
right from the Grossberg.
Grossman?
Grossberg.
Okay.
The LSTM.
Yes.
Like neural network architecture or perceptron architecture. Yeah.
I mean, there's also things like Google's Deep Dream, which that's kind of more of a style transfer one, but I know people who ran applications where they were using style transfer of historical like art onto photos people uploaded. And I've been thinking like using something like Deep Dream, which has like they used a modified version of it to play video games and train an AI at video games. Like Google's used it, different AIs like that a lot in trying to train AIs to play different experiences. And if that could be applied to different like neurologic things like either vision analysis or like image analysis and try to create some sort of feedback loop in the same way that when we think of something as correct, we get a little hit of like different drugs in our brain to a degree that it's like, yay, we got something right. If AI can get some sort of value add out of getting things correct and training itself on that stuff, which I think has been
reinforcement learning.
Yeah, but
it's a whole branch ML almost.
yeah,
now.
yeah, but reinforcement using like a extrinsic reward instead of a lot of reinforcement learning seems to be more intrinsic things. So combine more of the different layers of machine learning, whether it's style transfer or image recognition. Yeah, I just think there's so many machine learning algorithms that have never been combined properly that could give interesting effects.
So it's 9 o'clock. I know I'm going to be pulled away very soon. So I just want to mention one thing, which of course next week is Neuromatch. So yeah, check out the provisional schedule. They're going to cover some of these topics for sure. Or and of course Dan Goodman, who did the Brian workshops recently, has put together this provisional schedule. I mean, he's one of the co-founders of Neuromatch, and so you can find the provisional schedule from Neural Reckoning here. Also, this, today and tomorrow has been the IEEE Brain Workshop on Advanced Neurotechnologies. So many good speakers. The Society for Creativity and Neuroscience has been going on this week, or these today and tomorrow. The International Neuroethics Society meeting is today and tomorrow. And tomorrow is the NIMH Microbe Gut Brain Workshop, which is somewhat related to Todd Coleman's presentation, the EGG and EEG, the electrogastrogram, and connecting that to your microbiome and EEG brain signals. I'm looking forward to that. I was quite happy that everything, all the meetings that were mentioned in the Brain Initiative newsletter, I already had listed. So this does match the Brain Initiative meetings. This morning, hopefully I'll be able to find the YouTube of the human applications of low intensity focused ultrasound and neuromodulation. I did not catch that because I was talking to this developer in Zagreb, but yeah, it's still Hacktober, and there's still, I don't know if anybody's earned their T-shirt yet from DigitalOcean, but let's not forget that BrainFlow is a project that falls under the Hacktoberfest guidelines. And yeah.
What do you mean what do you mean BrainFlow? It's just like a thing we're doing.
It's an open source project.
Yeah, but how does that qualify for what's
so check the link for Hacktoberfest, digitalocean.com. So if in October, contributions to open source projects will earn you potentially swag and certainly the admiration of your peers. So BrainFlow was added.
Do I get a free shirt too?
if you make a contribution. Yeah.
What do you mean, like a financial contribution?
No, an actual contribution to the project.
I mean, I work with BrainFlow every day.
So again, check out the link for Hacktoberfest DigitalOcean. You can say hi.
Okay. I mean, do we have to submit something or?
again, check it out, Richard.
Okay.
Okay. But also, BrainHack is getting more serious about its planning. I still think we should be talking up, like even just by combining the efforts across chapters, like we could get a significant EEG crew together, and that in itself would make an awesome, brain hack global contribution. As well as like, I think it would just get the projects themselves some profile and hopefully some extra eyes and developers. And super relevant for for researchers in the time of COVID. Anyway, and Hackoween. So Brainweb and Roberto Toro, are planning to do another hackathon in October, and on Halloween. And so hopefully we'll get updates for that too. Okay. So gotta go.
I wonder how many fear-related EG studies happen